as they grow older and get busier, people normally go away from their own intimate selves. In Anil's case, it is very different. As he gets busier, I have always felt that he is becoming more and more, he's becoming closer to his self and his mission. That's something which is very remarkable, because he's got a special gift to kind of enter into a space and look at things very differently. So every crisis, if you are associated with him, you will know. Any crisis will become a kind of, new thing, like a new opportunity. He can transform a crisis into a new opportunity, and do all these things very lightly, without, the baggage of it. So as an organization, we identify with this, because we are named after, Leela is named after the creative play. And so we really identify with this kind of, he embodies for us that agility and the possibility to be, light, even as you do many things, make connections. So it is, we are really delighted that Anil is with us today to reimagine, to redefine, and to reignite India. Welcome, Anil. It is a pleasure to have you. And there is another innovation which is happening on these platforms. Those of you who are regulars at Leela events would know that our speakers actually choose their chairs, or moderators. But we have two, people from two different fields of knowledge today with us to respond to Anil's presentation. T. Ramaswamy, who is currently the Secretary of Science and Technology Department. He is a scientist. He has worked in various scientific areas, from leather technology to energy research. So it's a kind of wide variety of areas that he has worked in. And we are very happy that he is here to respond from the scientific perspective to Anil's lecture. And Dr. Kavita Sharma is the director of India International Center. Most of you must know her and her work. She is coming from the humanities background. She's a PhD in English literature, and she's written and published, widely in the arts, education, literature, gender relations. So we have two different perspectives here, and it's so good that we have somebody from a management institution, working in various fields of management, a humanities person and a scientist coming together. So as we always try to do, there is a kind of horizontal kind of connection that we are kind of reaching here on this platform. So we are indeed happy about that, and and I'm very happy that in this whole endeavor we have our magazine partner, the Caravan magazine, which is also a kind of space where narrative journalism is promoted. Not the kind of flash kind of things. In-depth kind of journalism where you have a lot of connections made. We have our public interface partner, Swecha, and we have India Habitat Center, India International Center, where Kavita is the director. We have the next lecture at India International Center, Harsh Mandar, speaking about inequality and indifference in India, and chaired by Shiv Vishwanathan, the social scientist. So I welcome all of you to to IIC also for the next lecture. It's the day after tomorrow. So I welcome Anil, please.
Thank you very much, Vijay, and it's an evening, very important evening for us, for the reason that the confluence of creativity, compassion, collaboration that is manifesting here is the essence of RDB Network. I must also admit the challenges under which we have to work. Dr. Ramaswamy has always created new benchmarks, very difficult to reach. He has touched through an Inspire program which deals with bright children of every single school of the country, numbering about 1.4 million, whereas NIF has only reached so far 0.18 million. Ideas, innovation, and traditional practices. So the factor of 10. And we have a long way to go because this country of 1 billion people, you can't be satisfied just with a fraction of a number that we have been able to access from 550 districts. So a long way to go, a very long way to go. And this is not a journey that any one individual group or institution can ever achieve and fulfill. Lots and lots of people have contributed to these ideas. In fact, more than 95% of the ideas that we have been able to discover actually are searched, are explored by people going out into the field. Hardly 5% or less than that reach us. So if we were waiting, then we would be just getting a fraction of the number. What has that got to do with the India redefined, reimagined, and reignited? When we decided to have this seminar, we didn't know what results will come in Delhi. But the results have certainly shown what is happening in Tunisia, what is happening in the Middle East, what is happening in Ukraine, what is happening in Singapore, what is happening in large parts of the world is a vote of no confidence against the status quo. People have realized that they have a voice. They always had a voice, but they had to use this voice in the available categories. Now they are inventing categories. In management jargon, we always talk about categories. How do you create new categories? In the marketing literature, people say, have you invented a new category when you talk about product placement, strategy and all of that? The people have discovered a new category which they did not have to articulate their choices, their beliefs, their aspirations. And in times to come, it is going to be more interesting because we are going to be in for many more experiments of this kind. Since we come from grassroots experience, having learned firsthand what people do through our Shodh Yatras, the 32nd Shodh Yatra will be in Punjab from December 28th to January 2nd. Every summer, every winter we go to places which are cold, summer we go to the places which are hot. So last Shodh Yatra was in Wardha, 47 degrees centigrade. But that makes our life easier because when you go and follow this pedagogy, we don't have to prove or convince anybody why we are there. It becomes obvious. So method must become a communicator of message. To me, that makes a lot of sense in connecting to the grassroots. And for us, fortunately, this has been the approach. I will talk about, of course, briefly about what Honeybee Network does. It has a nameless, faceless person. He gets in touch with the network, he gets an identity. That's the essence of Honeybee Network. In the field of culture, in the field of education, in the field of institutions, common property institutions, and in the field of technology. Srishti is a voluntary organization, Gyan is a voluntary organization, NIF is a body of DST, Department of Science and Technology. NIF focuses on children and grassroots innovations. Innovations by people who have not been part of formal system, who have not been part of organized sector, who have not received formal education beyond school or just arts, college, have no professional degree, and have solved problems in some unique way. I'll share with you some examples, recent examples, where the work that grassroots innovators have done is pushing the frontiers of technology, in some cases science. And that's very redeeming. It proves that there is something to be learned. Today afternoon I was with the National Institute of Plant Genomic Research, talking to them about varieties that farmers have developed which have unique traits, unique characteristics which scientists could benefit from if they could map them and transfer them to those varieties which need those characters. So there's a huge lot that can be done by building a bridge between formal and informal sector. There are 4 capitals that we harnessed in our work. I suppose anybody harnesses them. We are not the only one. But I must mention that what we are doing actually is not new. Ganga Bhan in 1898 wrote a book. She was a widow at the age of 14. She came from Mansa in Mehsana district. She wrote a book called as Hunar Mahasagar 2080 Recipes for Self-Employment. Probably one of the first such books in the Gujarati language. And it is said that Gandhiji got inspiration for Swadeshi from her work because Gandhiji did not use this concept before 1907. So she was ahead at least by almost 10 years of his thought on the subject. There was another book that I came across, Fortune in Formula for Firms and Farms. First published in 1905 in US. I got an old copy of this book, republished in 1943. It has been reprinted many times. And there's a connection between what Ganga Band did and what this book does in North America, where people had tried to find out how the soap made out of the fat of different fish species could be used for controlling pest, different kinds of pest. So different kinds of fishes, different kind of fats, different kind of pest. Now connection between three different forces of nature and the way they help in controlling pest was being done even in the early parts of European settlement. So there was a tradition of learning from the grassroots, I am saying, in different parts of the world. India had it, other parts of the world had it. Somehow, over a period of time, it has become weaker, and that's what we need to reimagine, redefine, and reignite, because there is no escape from learning from grassroots. For the simple reason, the more poor people are, the less they have to lose by experimentation. And therefore, they, by force of circumstances, experiment. So, natural capital, social capital, ethical capital, and intellectual capital. I will just focus on ethical capital because the rest I'm sure all of you are aware. It's a very important part of the grassroots innovation movement. Ethical capital is when you refuse to use certain resources despite having access to them because of internal sanctions and not external sanctions. So many of you have tulsi plant in your home, and after evening somebody is sick, you want to make a tea for them, and probably you will hesitate in plucking the leaves after sunset. Right? Nobody will sanction you, nobody will punish you, nobody will stop you from doing that, but you just don't do that. These are internal sanctions. In the spawning season, when fish go upstream to lay their eggs in shallow waters, there's a taboo on fishing, every part of the world. Every part of the world. Nobody goes and polices the fishing at the time. Actually, fish are very dull at that time. They're easy to catch. They're easy to catch at the time when they're spawning, laying the eggs. And at the time when it's easy to catch, society develops a norm of not catching them because that will disrupt the entire population dynamics of the fish. So society has always developed norms of self-regulation, which we have, for some reason, lost track of, and we are relying more and more on external regulation. The other day I met Dr. Kalam's place a few days back, and when he started this fast again, I said, look, do you think that we need a super cop to regulate our behavior? Is that what will save this country? Or do you think that in Ramlila Maidan you should have asked people to confess when they took a paid bribe and promised to themselves that they will not do it again? That would have been a transformative act. So ethical capital is not being harnessed enough, to my mind, in various walks of life. In innovations, we realize a new insight came when about 20 or 23 licenses that NIF and Honeybee Network did, where small entrepreneurs paid money to get the right to manufacture and market, even when patents had not been granted. So we asked them, why didn't you copy? You could have easily copied, you could have done nothing against you. They said, sir, but that innovator has spent so much effort. It doesn't look nice that we should just take this. Now this is an ethics of a small entrepreneur. Not one, not two, 23 such cases out of about 80 licenses that we did. So there is an ethical capital. I'm just trying to say, there is no doubt about it. And it shows up in the marketplace. So it is not that it is hidden. It is only shown in the backwaters of the country. It is evident in the marketplace. It's just that we have not paid attention to that. There are 5 tensions which guide our search for new definition or a new imagination of our country. One of them is autonomy and agency. People are not only asking for freedom to act, but they also want a framework to act. There may be autonomy. Earlier, agency was missing. People knew that they could do many things, they didn't do that. Now they're saying we can do it. And they want to take charge of it. This tension between autonomy and agency has been there in most societies, most democratic societies. For that matter, even in China today, this tension is coming up. Recent circular from the Politburo of China was that they will not offer costly cuisine, costly drinks, or the official meetings because they are realizing that the distance between their leadership and the common people had become too high. So they have launched a very major austerity drive in China because they realize that the distance will not be bridged otherwise. If they live, the elite, the managerial system live a lifestyle which is too far away from the common people, then people will suspect their motives. So any part, even non-democratic societies are trying to look at this tension. Accuracy versus affordability, I'll spend more time on that later. Can we make a trade-off? You have a medicine which costs 100 rupees a month, but cures disease only 80% of the time with no side effects. Another medicine which cures it 99% of the time and costs 10,000 rupees a month. Should we make that medicine which costs 100 rupees? The logic is, from a systems biology point of view, from ecological point of view, when you bring the population of stress or disease or an organism or a pest below the 80%, quite possible that the nature's own immune system, nature's own predators will take care of the 20%. So we work with nature rather than against it. That's more holistic, that's more sustainable, and more affordable, less costly, scientifically better for long term, because less resistance will develop in those cases. So it makes sense to develop drugs, but no scientific journal will publish a paper at less than 1 or 5% level of significance. Never. So if you have results at 5%, 10% or 15%, 20%, nobody will. What kind of thing that you're talking about? Now, which compares with the uncertainty that people face in their life, huge. So from 50%, which is random, to 80% is quite an advance in terms of certainty in life. And if that is being achieved at a cost which is marginally higher, then people can say, well, give me that much certainty. Don't give me 99%, give me 80%. So I'm saying there is a new paradigm required for us to ask this question, that except in the life-saving cases where there is no choice, you either have this or not have this, where there are gradations available and no side effects, no extra adversity because of the less accuracy, in those cases can we think about affordable solutions of some kind. Blueprint versus autopoiesis. This debate has been there for long. Autopoiesis is the ability of nature to self-correct itself. Self-design, self-correct. A lot of cells in our body go through mutations. Thank God they don't become cancerous. So we are all healthy, we are able to talk to each other. Nature has this system of self-healing. Can materials have this property? Can machines have this property? Can systems have this property to correct themselves? I always believe that if you have strong institutions and weak policies, in the process of implementation, they will become stronger, they will become more aligned to the goals. But if you have strong policies and weak institutions, no matter what you do, they are bound to be distorted. That is the way system works. So if we can spend more time on institutions, then ability to self-correct will become much higher, much more amplified, much more articulated. But we have not spent energy in building institutions, unfortunately. In fact, those institutions which work very well, they weakened them. Whether it was Zilla Parishad, whether it was Village Panchayat, whatever institutions were working well, we have made them diluted. Recently, a few days back, we had an opportunity to talk to 350 women Sarpanch of Gujarat. In those villages, all members of the Panchayat are women, all officials are women, and such 350 such villages existed in that state out of 18,000. And we had an opportunity to spend 2 days with them. And we asked them a simple question: what will you do on 26 January? They had no agenda. So I said, can you identify the best teacher, the best student, the best farmer, the best carpenter, and can you honor them? Then we start a new ritual of honoring the outstanding performer, no matter which class they belong to, on 26 January. On 15th August, invite the similar people from other villages. So that once you honor people from within the village, second time you honor people from other villages. So that we create a culture of appreciating people within ourselves. This country often says, जब तक बाहर से recognition नहीं मिलता है, हम लोग नहीं करते. But this has to change. This cannot continue like this. So we thought, let us start at the grassroots level. let us begin to recognize our own talent at village level itself, and I'm sure it will happen at all levels above, slowly and slowly. So people don't have to be waiting for recognition from outside before being recognized by our own society. The institutional-led, user-adopted to user-created or co-created solutions. We have companies are trying this, corporations are trying this, institutions are trying this. They're trying to find user-led innovations, user-based innovations, user-derived innovations. Huge movement is going around the world now. We found even in medical innovations, more than 65 to 70% innovations in our country, as much as in Europe, are done by the doctors themselves, not by the engineering institutions and not by others. So there is a huge potential for people who use things, services and goods to modify them and improve them. And that is another element of innovation that we need to capture. Symmetrical and asymmetrical open innovation platform. There's hardly any company today which doesn't talk about open innovation. There are few countries which don't talk about open innovation. Why? Because they realize the limits of what formal R&D can do. Large number of pharma companies, Siemens has announced open innovation, Procter & Gamble has announced open innovation, J&J has announced open innovation, GE has announced open innovation. You name the company, and they all have open innovation platform seeking ideas from outside. Seeking ideas from outside, from the crowd, so to say, for solutions that they would like to then develop and take forward. Why have they started doing this? Because they have recognized that because of the convergence of thinking which happens in the closed R&D groups, the creativity goes down, and therefore innovation don't come about as much as they are likely to or they are required. So you need a very diverse pool. Which is the diverse? Society must be diverse pool. What kind of imagination we are talking about in India? We are talking about highly heterogeneous, highly pluralistic, highly diversified view of India, as against homogenization, as against single belief of culture, single unified thinking of culture. There cannot be one. There is not one Mahabharata. Dr. Kavita has written a book on beast, birds,
beast, men and nature.
Bird, beast, man and nature, Beautiful book which tells us a great deal about the way we learn from nature, the metaphors, the folklore that is available. My favorite one is the squirrel. The squirrel millions of squirrels for millions of years would have collected the sand from the shore and gone and rolled in the sea, and the bridge would not have been built. It was an impossible act, but that led to the rejuvenation of the spirit of the Sena, the army of Ram, and then they ultimately built the bridge and did the rest. So a non-sustainable act, infeasible act, can generate a tremendously sustainable outcome. That's the power of the metaphors that are there around us. So how do we imagine that there will be one source of metaphor, one source of inspiration for the whole country? There cannot be. And we have discovered when we walk around the country so many examples which I will come to. So I will skip this. How do we look at innovations? There are three dimensions: affordable, accessible, available. You can have affordability which is high. You can have accessibility which could also be high. What about availability? So I can go to a ration shop and I can afford to buy, let's say, rice. But if it's not available, what do I do with access? What do I do with the affordability? So how do we convert, assuming that I'm aware of the ration, I'm aware of the medicine, I'm aware of the solution. So when Dr. Ramaswamy used the technology in CLRI and provided it to Kolhapuri chapel makers, and Toehold, an NGO in Karnataka, used that to export those choppers using the technology of CLRI. It was not only affordability, but also accessibility and availability which were combined together. There are solutions available in this country which have combined the three. But is this the paradigm in which we work? Do we take these three matrices into account when we design programs and services and goods? That's the question that we must ask. Is it difficult to imagine? No, it is easy to imagine that all the three are required. Then why do we design systems of delivery, systems of providing services and goods which do not have all the three integrated? What's the point? What's the logic? Obviously, when you do not take into account transaction costs, ex ante and ex post, they are transferred to the weaker section. That's very well known. So if you don't anticipate and don't provide for this transaction cost, then who will bear them? The weaker person will bear them. Always, in any transaction. It's the rule of the day, rule of the market, rule of the society. And that's what we have done such a long time. We have excluded a lot of people. So how do we do that? Out of at least 3 dimensions, material, method and application, one should be new to call it innovation. Very simple. Very simple. So I can use azadirachtin, a compound extracted from neem, and I use it for the same purpose, that is a pesticide. But I develop it by a method which makes it storage stable. That means it doesn't decompose in the light. That's an innovation. I use aspirin, which is well-known molecule, and I develop it by a method which is well-known, but use it for thinning the blood. That becomes an innovation, a new application. So one of the 3 should be new. In other words, innovations are not difficult. Anybody can do that. Everybody should be able to do that. That's my point. The democratization of innovation is what we have seen in this country, where almost anybody and everywhere we have gone, we have found people who have followed this dictum. It's very simple. They have found new uses, they have found new methods, they have found new materials and used them in a manner that generates very frugal solutions. And materials, what kind of materials do we use? Frugality in quantity. Sometimes we use very frugal solution, the 1 rupee sachet of plastic, and disseminate polluting material all over the country in the most interior areas. So was it affordable? Was it cheap? Was it economical? Was it frugal? No, we transfer the cost from our balance sheet to a balance sheet of nature, which had no ability to absorb it. So future generation and generation in this era are paying the price for that. Such innovations we should not call as frugal. They are very costly innovations. It is wrong to call such innovations as frugal and thereby generate legitimacy. Mental legitimacy, policy legitimacy should never be granted to such solutions which create heavy overload on the environment and on the system, which will not be able to bear or absorb that cost. The circular economy, the concept of circular economy, from cradle to cradle, cradle to grave, is the way to go in the future. That's the way. When I was a child and we brought something from the market, early 60s, late 50s, at that time even paper envelope was not very popular. So a shopkeeper will have a piece of paper, he will put the things inside, wrap it and take a thread hanging from the roof and tie it. That's the way he will give a parcel. So when I came home, my grandfather would say, okay, now you take the things out, you take the piece of paper, put it under the bed, hang that piece of thread on a nail for the next round of use. एक धागा तो नहीं फेंकते थे हम लोग 1 मीटर का. That is the culture, that is the sanskar of the society. Frugality was in our sanskar. What happened to that? Why is the new generation thinking that we have enough to waste, when enough to use, enough to consume? I think there is something which needs to be done afresh. I am not saying that we need to create a physical scarcity, but we can create a mental category of scarcity. We can say, no, we don't have enough, and we will have to be frugal in using those things. So this sanskar, which has almost disappeared, has to be revived and rejuvenated and restored in our life, so that becomes the guiding principle for developing solutions, for delivering solutions, for consuming solutions, for disposing solutions. The whole cycle should become much more sustainable. Just methods should be concentrated, should be distributed, iterative, blueprint, locally repaired or repaired from outside. Obviously, people will prefer things that they can repair locally. You must have seen those watchmakers, watch repairing people, no? They have a glass cabin on the roadside. If somebody has to take a training in concentration, talk to a watch repair person. In the midst of huge traffic, noise, sound, horns, honking, the fellow concentrates with the 2 lenses and 1 lens in the eye on the small component of a watch and repairs that undisturbed. He is the sthit pragya. If you want to see in daily life sthit pragya, he is the sthit pragya. Doesn't get affected at all by the noise. That means it is possible to concentrate and harness our energy which is innate in us for an end that we want to achieve, without getting disturbed by all the noise that may be taking place in social media. social media or otherwise. We can focus. I'm taking a pun. I'm really at this moment talking to my young friends who spend a lot of time on Facebook and Twitter and whatever that. 10 minutes is all that we should spend on social media a day. And anybody who spends more than 10 minutes, I think is wasting his hour of time. Don't mind my saying this as a person with a beard. You allow me to sermonize a little bit. Applications, low and high and diversified, specialized, where who can modify, who can. The word makeshift, never use the word regard. I have not used it, I will not use it, but I want to tell you, you should also not use it. It's a mindset which helps you to go around the problem. It doesn't help you to get over the problem. If plug is not fitting, because you can't manufacture properly, then you put a matchstick there, that is jugaad. We don't want jugaad culture in this country. We have to get out of it. We have to get out of it. India will not grow into a serene, proper society, civilized society, compassionate society by having jugaads. No. It's a lazy intellectualism. You have difficulty in creating categories in which you want to conceptualize innovative potential of our country, and you just say, oh, India does jugaad. That's nonsense. Absolutely nonsense. We should not use it. Please avoid that. So frugality is flexible, frugality is friendly, frugality is affordable. And there are 4 levels at which you can learn from innovation. You can learn from them at the artifactual level. So there is a windmill, and I can make a bamboo windmill into a metallic windmill. That is artifactual. You can learn it at analogical level, metaphorical level. Lotus leaf leads to the self-cleaning metals, self-cleaning surfaces. That is the analogical level. You can learn it at the heuristic level. I'll give you examples how new heuristics are emerging from grassroots innovation. Those heuristics which a trained mind possibly would not have imagined. For example, will you ever imagine maximizing output per unit of time is not a universal principle? Can anybody argue against this? Can anybody give an example where maximizing output per unit of time is not better? Difficult, no? But I'll show you an example. There are many examples where slower delivery is more efficient than faster delivery. And 4th is just Gestalt, the configuration of technology, institutions and culture. So this fellow thought about a young boy, said, why can't I use a windmill to harness the wind for running a ceiling fan? Mohammad Ali Patel in Jalgaon. Sahi hai, class 2 ka bachcha hai, got an award from Dr. Kalam for his creativity. Yes. He has already imagined a bevel gear, which an engineering student will learn in 3rd year or 2nd year, in mechanical engineering. This is the analogy where a student, JNCSR, Techpedia, which is a huge portal of technology students project, have designed a surface which repels the dust. This is autopoiesis, self-correcting ability. This tree didn't know that it was not supposed to branch. By mistake it did. And then, my God, what have I done? So it converted that into a stem. It's a real tree. I have not mocked it. I have seen this tree. That happens in nature all the time. So we do the repairs, corrections. Now this is the example of a windmill, a kind of a 5,000 rupees windmill, which was developed by Mehtar Hussain and Mushtaq Ahmed to pump with a hand pump water for irrigating paddy field. What was the innovation? He asked 2 questions which we don't ask. First question he asked, does it matter whether I irrigate my paddy field in 4 hours or 40 hours? In fact, if you think of it carefully, if you give a slower irrigation, less nutrients will be leached. Plants need moisture, not water. They need moisture, not water. Slow irrigation is more efficient for the plant. Second question they asked, does it matter whether, because hand pump has a single valve, well, does it matter whether water comes in spurts or smoothly? It doesn't matter really. He didn't provide a gearbox. Now this heuristic, I am learning from a windmill at a windmill level, I am learning from a windmill at a metaphorical level, I am learning from a windmill now at a heuristic level. These 2 heuristics, many trained people will have hesitation in imagining. So we will by definition design things for maximizing output per unit of time, even if that output has to be kept, because my demand may not synchronize with my production schedule. So I will have now to pay for warehouse, where I have to keep the stock for the remaining period of the year and then sell it slowly and slowly. We can think about how new heuristics are generated. Let me give you a Gestalt level heuristic. We were in Purulia, Bankura, my favorite example. Under a tree we found these beautiful terracotta horses. So we asked the potters, during one of our Shodhyatra in Bengal, we asked the potters, why did you keep such beautiful horses under a tree? Koi le jayega, tod dega. Well, sir, there is by the time they knew that people were addressing me as professor, Bole, Professor Saab, there's a small mistake. I said, what mistake have I done? They said, sir, we haven't kept the beautiful ones, we have kept the best ones. Why do we keep the best one? So when our children pass by this street, they should know what the current standard of the best is, they should do better. Which management book has this lesson of open source standards of excellence developed by the communities to encourage their children to do better than what their parents have done? I have not come across. Isn't it marvelous? Isn't it magnificent? Isn't it inspiring? This is the essence of our country. Do we know this? Can we imagine this? Can we use this to define our own identity of self and our society? No, we don't use these matrices, so to say, these parameters by which we should measure. This country is much richer in its ability to set standards. You see? And these standards are far more accurate, far more sharp than the standard we use every day in our life to measure our own performance, our own dedication, our own motivation, our own concern for goods. Many times my students ask, sir, how do you remain energetic? What is the logic? What is the argument? I said, very simple matrix I can use. You can also use this. Take a piece of paper, ask in the last 1 week how much of time you spent on private good, common good, and public good. That ratio will determine how energetic and happy you are. Very simple. What is so mysterious about it? Isn't it possible? We can do that ourselves. And every week you can monitor your happiness level. Because this ratio can be measured precisely. So it's not difficult. Our society has given us many matrices of this kind. This is another example. This bridge in Meghalaya, Megriat village in Cherrapunji. Maybe I don't know some of you have gone there or not. I have walked on this along with other fellow Shodhyatris. They pulled the roots of the trees, ficus trees from two sides of the river. They could have simply taken a rope and made a bridge. They could have taken a wire and made a bridge. Why did they have to do this? Because this has least entropy possible, humanly possible. Practically everything is recyclable. But it cannot be done only at the technological level. It needs institutions, collective action. It needs culture of creativity which says, no, I don't want to do what others have done. I must do something different. This country is not a country of imitators. This is the urban notion of, the metropolitan notion of what this country is. Very, very limited notion of this country. 8% of organized sector may be imitative. But not the 92% of this country is imitative. Mark that. Very creative society. Very creative society. So words are, technology is like word, institutions are like grammar, culture is like thesaurus. And to me, all the three are required to make a meaningful sentence. And if that is the case, then we should have this. Honorable President gives award every 2 years. India is the only country where head of the state hosts an exhibition of innovation every year. You're all welcome to March 2nd week when we will have another exhibition coming year at Rashtrapati Bhavan. The only exhibition our Rashtrapati Bhavan hosts is of innovation, grassroots innovations. And only head of the state, out of all the countries in the world. Obama doesn't do it, Cameroon doesn't do it, nobody else does it, Queen doesn't do that, only our president does it. And our former president gives award to children every year in Ignite. And our president does something more. When he goes to central universities everywhere, he's going to go to Haryana very soon. We have received a message yesterday. So what he will do, among other things, he will have grassroots innovators there and other innovators present at the time of his, before he gives his lecture. He will also inaugurate the National Innovation Club. And what these clubs will do? Search, spread, sense, and celebrate. Search for creative solutions, spread creative solutions, sense the unmet needs, and celebrate the achievements. Shekhar, every college should do that. Every institution should do that. Isn't it? Everybody should do that. It's a simple thing to do. Every institution, every office, every enterprise, every network, every group can have a club of this kind where we encourage ourselves to question all the time, to be surprised. I always believe the day I am not surprised, I have not lived. The necessary condition, not a sufficient condition for life. but a necessary condition. If you have not been surprised any day, it's something that you say, my God, I didn't know this. You have not lived that day. Very simple. So search will give us that insatiable desire to get surprised is what will drive the search. Different models that people have developed. This you must have seen in a film, remember? And in that film, there was another innovation where cycle was used to shape the sheep. That was by Muhammad Idris. This is by Sheikh Jahangir from Jalgaon. What is the idea? The idea is that people who are very poor would not be able to buy quintal or tons of grains. They will buy kilograms or grams. वो 500 ग्राम अनाज कहाँ पिसवाएगा? कोई चक्की वाला पीसेगा क्या? नहीं पीसेगा ना. So then a chakki on the scooter goes there and grinds 500 gram of wheat or 500 gram of flour, whatever you have, at a doorstep. Once we start defining the technological parameters by the need of the person who has to buy every day and survive every day, our technological paradigm will change. India will get redefined, reimagined, reignited. Please appreciate there are needs which have remained unmet for centuries. Bastar, I have been to Bastar. I have been to Narayanpur, I have been to Arku Valley, Anantnag. You go to Bastar, Narayanpur area, and you look at how they take the salt seed, how they extract the oil. They take an old tree, cut the half tree into two parts. Take the base, put the seeds on they make some grooves, put the seed there, put the other half, sit on it. 10,000 years ago, they might have found this way of extracting oil. Today, they bring that. And we blame them for being angry. And we use 20,000 crores we spend in 35 districts to fight our people. I'm not saying violence is any solution to any problem, but let us accept it. Not 1 gram of forest produce in this country is valorized in situ. That's the crisis, that's the root of tribal crisis in this country. The root of tribal crisis is not 1 gram of forest produce is valorized in situ, that means in the forest. Everything comes out as raw material. Everything, 100%. Now, they are treated as wage laborers. And you can't increase the wages beyond a limit, no matter how compassionate you are, because some production function has to be taken care of. So the result is, unless you add value in situ, unless you have processing system within the forest, you will not increase the income of tribal people who will develop these machines without power, without... What are the incentives for people to do that? Are we challenging our youth to do that? Which is the portal where these problems have been posed to the students of IIT Delhi or any other institution? Who is doing that? Shekhar, we have not challenged our students to develop solutions to these problems. They are not challenging them. So it is not the students' problem. I don't want to blame young people. It's our mistake. Our generation has failed them by not challenging them and not connecting them to the problems that our society is facing. A beautiful coffee cappuccino you can have by converting a pressure cooker into a steam generator. Tozadin has done it in Champaran. Beautiful. Bicycle refrigerator, 30 minutes you cycle, you can reduce temperature from 35 degrees centigrade to 8 degrees centigrade. If you have to keep a medicine in the cold environment in a village where there is no power, you have a solution. Where has it been developed? In a polytechnic. Not in a degree college. Not in NITs, not in IITs. In a polytechnic, Sangli. The fact that a lot of good ideas are coming from small towns and small institutions is the reality of our country. India needs redefinition. India needs to be recognized that in small places, there are big minds. In big places, they want to be a follower, they want to be a small spoke in the Google's machine, That's what a job that they are looking for. Samsung comes and hires 35, 40 IITians, and that's a huge celebration. Because they will all become small spoke in the wheel. I'm sure they're brilliant people, no doubt, otherwise they would not be getting such huge salaries. They're brilliant, and some of them come to our institute then. And we polish platinum on gold, We don't deal with iron, we don't deal with copper, we deal with gold. My God. So these are the 3 examples, just a simple example, how creativity happens in communities. The first one is Jyoti from Andhra Pradesh, Meghalaya, Mizoram. What are they doing? All of us have kitchen, all of us have gas. Have you ever thought about using the heat which is going across the vessels? Around the vessel, the flue gases? No. We don't have a shelf above the chula. She has, and in Mizoram they have 4 shelves. Look at that. We will teach them about energy conservation, or they can teach us something about energy conservation. You have vegetables which you throw away because they are stale. You could dry them. Just try to dry bitter gourd or gourds on this shelf on the top of the gas, and you can fry them. It's a beautiful snack actually. You can eat it in the off season. Very good. Why waste it? She knows it. She knows it. In fact, she uses for many other purposes. I don't have time. Look at this. Arnav from West Bengal sent an idea. Sometimes rickshawala gets down when there's a climb. He said, why can't passenger co-paddle? That's the model of co-creation. These are our children who are telling us how can we be compassionate. Look at this. I have seen, you have seen, all of us have seen rickshaws of this situation. We have sat on the rickshaw. Now, दिमाग में this विचार नहीं आया ना? Because all claims, despite all claims to humanitarian feelings, we are actually indifferent. We are insensitive. But this kid is very sensitive. So he got an award from Dr. Kalam for this. This is a Techpedia where Shanu has developed this wheelchair which climbs the stairs. These kids developed a software which can process the sign language of deaf and dumb and convert that into text. So deaf and dumb can make a friendship with an ordinary person. Wouldn't it be nice? They are no different from us, just that we can't understand their sign language. So it doesn't matter, now we have software, process their sign language and convert it. What I'm saying, this is inclusive development. This is inclusive innovation. Did he get any support? No, unfortunately not yet. We couldn't invest because that's not within the mandate of the lab, and we are not yet there. But someday it will be possible to help such kids all over the country who are developing great solutions. All of you have refrigerators, isn't it? Do you know refrigerator also produces heat? Do we use that heat? Is there any company in the world which manufactures refrigerator which uses heat of the compressor? No. I've asked this question at MIT. I've asked this question at Harvard. Nobody has any refrigerator. Nobody manufactures. But this boy, Dhruv, has designed this. He has put a heat exchanger on the compressor. Take the heat away, you have hot water, and when you take the heat away, compressor works less energy consumption. That is the model of innovation that India wants to develop. Less carbon intensity, more output. Prime Minister has given a promise in theatre that 20% less carbon intensity by 2020. How will we do that? This is the solution to that. Beautiful example of heat exchange. So we have a golden triangle which we are trying to forge. I will give you a few examples where NIF has signed agreements with companies. Before I close, this is one case where the company has promised to market a machine for milking cows or buffaloes and has huge network, something that innovator could not have done. GE gave solutions for a particular problem that this innovator was facing. Its machine has become more efficient. And look at where these units have gone. They have gone to South Africa, Kenya, Germany, Italy, Singapore. We call it G2G model, from small g to capital G, grassroots to global. We are trying to show that innovations at the grassroots level can have global markets, And only thing I must give credit to them is we did not find these buyers. Buyers found us. We are not that smart at the moment. They found us out and put their orders to us. And I have signed an agreement with Tata Agrico where this sugarcane bud chipper is manufactured by Roshan Lal Vishwakarma in his village, employing 30 people. And Tata Agrico, one of the major companies of Tata's, commercializes it. Manufactured by innovator in a village, commercialized by the Tata company in the different parts of the country. That's a new model which is emerging. Never had we imagined. Did we ever imagine this will happen? But this is happening. So new partnerships are being forged. Look at this. Recently Mohanlal got an award for 20 lakhs. I was on 3rd December at Thiruvananthapuram, and he has got an agreement signed with Matsya. Don't look at the white beard fellow, this is by mistake. I don't want to show my photograph, but I happened to be present there when this agreement was transferred and was exchanged with the Matsya MD, and this innovator has developed a Z drive which reduces fuel, which has a fuel economy, which has less pollution, both sound and fuel, and does not damage the nets on the shore when the boat comes for beach landing. 3 advantages. It will transform the economy, and it has come from Mohanlal, who is under huge debts. Thankfully, his life will turn around. We are launching on 20th of December in Thatwik. We organized Traditional Food Festival at IMA campus. This is a new company set up in which NIF's contribution 34% in kind, we have not put a money, and Paisa and penny, 33% by Ensign and another partner, and they will commercialize in food products. What he found, he has a network of 8,000 mithai walas. He said, we have an antioxidant. He said, sir, I will get mithais with antioxidants in future. New ideas, great ideas. This is going to be a brand that you will come across soon. Yuan, long life. Yuan. Maybe I could just briefly mention that we had incubation model. Those of you who are interested in finding out how we take innovations forward. Earlier we talked about incubation model. Incubation is good when domain characteristics are known and technology platform is available. If you take the other extreme, when both domain are unknown and technology platform are unknown, I call it sanctuary model. The sanctuary model is where chaos is inside, order is outside. In incubator, chaos is outside, order is inside. The India of future will need sanctuaries. Full freedom, full autonomy. Don't ask too many forms to be freedom. Don't have too many rules. Give us freedom, that's what the young generation wants, and they will turn around this country if they give them this freedom. We need to create more and more sanctuaries for sustainable innovations and not incubators. Incubator is a passing. It's an old model. Time is over. That was a time when markets were less fluctuating, and we thought we knew about how to take them to the market. Markets have become much more fluctuating and much less predictable. Incentives, we need to provide both material and non-material, individual and collective, and a portfolio of incentives. If you ask anybody what is the thing that he enjoyed most, it's quite likely that he did not pay for that thing. And yet we believe ourselves, we convince ourselves that it is market and market alone coming from management. I am Nandabal. Please take it with a realistic. Yes. Sugar, you will agree with me. We have pushed too hard in the mind of young people that it is only the market which can provide solutions. Which kind of market? Economic, commercial market or social market or cultural market? Which market? We can have many markets, isn't it? We need to create, we need to think about things that we have not paid for. And if they are the most legitimate, for example, appreciation by a peer, do I pay for it? You can't pay for it. But that's what you cherish most. So there are many things which are non-material and yet have great profound impact on our motivations. So a portfolio of incentives is required. We should not go too strongly with the material incentives alone. It is misleading us. It is not the direction in which our society has ever thought about going. It is not the direction in which we will go very far. And you can go on net and find very interesting videos available under RSA which show that after a point, material incentives cease to motivate. In fact, sometimes by increasing material incentives, you decrease the performance. There are studies to show that. So please think twice when you create portfolio of incentives. This is a drug based on people's knowledge by pooling the knowledge of different communities. In pest control, we have solutions, large number of solutions. So we have sold things all over the world, but we're not happy with what we have done so far because it's a small team, only few successes. We have to go very far. From 62 countries, we received queries, and I have received queries about products and successes, which shows that there is a huge potential for grassroots innovations to influence not just the mindset and future of our country, but large number of societies around the world are looking for these solutions, which essentially means that there is some unmet need which that grassroots innovator has identified, which we couldn't. Obviously. Otherwise, why would people ask for it? We need to have cultural, other innovations. Before I close, I want to talk about only one recent discovery, and I will close with that. There is a particular material that some tribal people use in Rajasthan and Gujarat for polishing clay vessels. So a representative from Tata Steel was sitting in the meeting of Research Advisory Committee meeting of NIF, and they were struggling with a product called as graphene, which is a carbon molecule, layer of carbon. And they thought that this might become a good sticking material for those, because they had powder, they wanted to coat a surface with graphene. Graphene is the material of future, I'll tell you in a minute. They took this, and when they heated it to a particular level of temperature, they found that it became graphene. Now we have been able to develop a method of graphene, making graphene at a cost nobody in the world can imagine. The CVD, another method that HP and Stanford University are trying, a very costly method. Now you look at it this way, that Moore's law, that every 18 months the capacity of the chips doubles. If ever this law is broken, which is likely to be broken, then instead of silicon wafers, we will be using graphene as a material for making chips in future. India missed the chip making potential. We don't make any chip in this country, we only design them. They are made elsewhere. With graphene being able to make in this country at cost which is unimaginably low, we may be able to get back into the chip, semiconductor chips. And if we do, that will happen because a community, a tribal community, gave us a hint about a very thin layer that they were coating on a clay vessel. I cannot reveal more because patent is under process. But I can tell you that frontiers of technologies can be pushed forward by building bridges between forward and forward science. So I want to close on this thought that it is not my message that grassroots innovators can solve all problems. No, definitely not. But they can solve a few problems. And sometimes they don't know why the problem gets solved. That's what scientists do. That's what the philosophers will do. That's what the other people will do sometimes. And the fusion of those two will take place. So creativity counts, matters. Innovations transform and incentives inspire, but not just material incentives, non-material incentives, not just individual incentives, but also collective incentives. Thank you so much.
I'm sure everybody would agree that this was an absolutely fascinating, mesmerizing talk. I'll start on a personal note. Because I dabble in higher education and I find our system, lots of things not correct with that system, to put it mildly. And so I started to write on what should be the place of research, because as you know, we've had a lot of this business of everybody should be researching and why are we only teaching, and all this dichotomy between teaching and research and so on and so forth. And then I got a call from a colleague in South Africa saying that would I help, he's gone to a project, he was a Fulbright scholar with me, he's on to a project which shows that higher education and economic development have a direct correlation. So would I help with that, and would I do the India part of it? And I started to think about it. And I said no, because then if what is going to drive research is only that we are going to become richer and richer, then perhaps that's not the right way of doing research. And that is why I find that this newfound desire for research is really desire for material prosperity, which can come very quickly through this research. And so I'm actually very happy with what Professor Anil Gupta said about the ethical capital of this country, because somewhere this has to be built into whatever our institutions are doing. So when I started to do this, I started to think more and more about it, and that's when I came across the work of Professor Anil. And I read and read and read. There's lots of it on the net. So he's very open about it.
Without copyright notice.
Yeah, so I actually read a whole lot and all the different little organizations, most of what he has said, and then he will vouch for it. I sought him out when I went to Ahmedabad, and he was kind enough to give me time, and we spent, I think, a very pleasurable 40-45 minutes. And therefore I think I almost invited myself here rather than anyone else inviting me. But when I started to think about it, my response to what he has spoken today and what was available to me was that really why have we done what we have done in the higher education system? Because I think at least post-World War, we have always associated modernization, whatever we mean by modernization, with the West, and which is to be now, with all due respects to the economists, and it seems to me the more the economic sort of solutions are given, the worse it seems to get in the actual economy. We keep measuring everything in GDP, GNP, etc., etc., and also there is an assumption, especially a metropolitan assumption, and that is that this modernization and economic success which we have borrowed from the paradigms of the West will somehow create a homogeneous modern culture, which would be a culture which is like a Western culture, and that's why we are all moving, trying very hard to move to that. But there is a discontent. There's a discontent with this, and this Western paradigm that we have taken in the field of education, what we have done is, and that's what attracted me to Professor Anil Gupta's work, is we have declared almost 90% of our population to be uneducated because it doesn't fit into our paradigm. So that's why we keep on saying we are going to have now enrollment 22%, 50%, 30%, whatever, because the rest of it is all uneducated. But actually the rest of it is highly educated. May not be literate in us, but they're very educated. As all these innovations would tell you, their survival and their preservation of biodiversity and everything else that's worth living for is far more than what we have ever done. And therefore, when we emphasize this Western model of, and I'm not decrying it, it's done lots of good to us also. So we have to somehow find a model which will fit in, create an ecosystem which will absorb both or have room for both. I think what it has done is that it has taught us something which doesn't exist in our culture, or has not till we have made it exist and made it fashionable and made it somewhat progressive. And that is that all economic growth requires us to disregard concerns of relationships, whether they are intergenerational relationships or whether they are intragenerational relationships. We need not worry about ecology, and I don't really believe in sustainable development because that's really saying stop being so greedy, but it's not shifting the paradigm. It's not really shifting the paradigm. We have, in that paradigm, created inequity, so we don't take into concern social justice. Many of those issues were raised by Professor Gupta here. And so I think we need new social movements. Because of this discontent and the growing realization that what we are doing is actually creating inequities, disparities, violence, everything else that he was talking about. And I think this new paradigm of development will have to be a radical shift to civilizational cultural values. That has to be put into the center of it and not the economics. The economics will follow. And therefore, we need to take into account people's identities, their signifying systems. We have to take into account their cosmologies. I work on Mahabharata. I've been trying now to get out of Vyasa's Mahabharata and start reading Bhiloki Mahabharata and other folk traditions of Mahabharata, because they are saying something quite different from what Vyasa is saying. We have to take what environment we will live in and what is our life system and the beliefs that we have in our life system. And since I belong to the Department of English, where we have fought many a battle, I see a couple of my colleagues here from the Department of English, we were more loyal than the British themselves in our curriculum and syllabus. And it's been a very hard fought battle, and I've been a part of these curriculum committees, syllabus making committees, where people have thrown files at each other and so on. It's been a process of attrition. But the moment you talk of an Indian author, or you have, that kind, to use a short form, because I don't want to take up too much of your time, the students immediately respond. Because it's familiar, the values are familiar, it has an emotional connect which the other things don't have. So I think in our next model of development, if it exists, if it comes into being, and hopefully the work of Professor Anil Gupta and others will bring it into being, is that we will have to identify, we will have to emphasize cultural identity. And we will have to development will be a culture, part of a cultural community. And because they know their own belief systems, and they also know what they would be willing to accept and what they will not be willing to accept. Also, I think if you work on a community basis, then the self-reliance of that community would have to be very important, rather than just imposing something from outside and saying, now if you do this, then you will become progressive or rich or whatever else, and otherwise you won't. And so, because it's a community that's quite aware of the strengths and weaknesses. Also, I think the development efforts will have to prioritize the most needy in that community, rather than make, and also I think the community, which what you have shown, is very much aware of its local ecosystems. And therefore you don't need to experiment, because what we destroy, we cannot restore. But we continuously keep destroying whatever it is. At the same time, but then you need a radical paradigm shift in the education system. You need a more open-ended education system, which will help us to absorb this and find a place, not as a set syllabus, but as an innovation. So we need to make space in our curriculum for that. And so I said, okay, how does that happen? We need to create an ecosystem from the local to the global. And the communities also have to be made aware of what is happening in the world. At the same time, allowing them to adapt, adjust, and learning from them. So what kind of research do we need to do? And I did speak at one of the IITs on this, and they were not very happy for saying this. And that is that it's a fact of life that 95% of research happens in developed countries, because they have a head start in terms of education, they have a head start they have a lot more resources than we have, and therefore most of the questions posed are those that need solutions. So the research problem posed is that needs a solution and is applicable to that developed country. And therefore when we become part of it, very often we are not doing anything for our own country or for our own community actually. And therefore what it does is also it creates imbalances in what we produce. And I think it prioritizes, which we've all seen who belong to the university and educational institutions. It prioritizes certain subjects over the others. Now maybe because I belong to literature and humanities, I feel that even more strongly than if I didn't belong to them. And also, the consequences of the research that we do are not known to the community at all. We just sit in some ivory towers, we do the research, and then we say, we have come to teach you. But why do we always go to teach people? Why do we not go to also learn from people? But हम लोग को बहुत ये बीमारी है that when we go to do even social work, we go to a village to teach, but we never go to a village to learn or to any other place. So therefore, we have to really get out of the enlightenment agenda, because what we are following is the agenda that started with Reformation, Renaissance, Industrial Revolution, and Age of Enlightenment, rationalism, and we've all bought into it because those are the influential countries, and we were colonized nations. And therefore, we have to do research which cannot be neutral. There is no research that is neutral. Even science research is not neutral. It has consequences and impact on society. We need to create democratic spaces where we take our research and which is available. आप अभी चौराहे की बात कर रहे हैं, which is available in that चौराहा, at least in the चौपाल, कि इसका impact क्या होगा? What are the consequences, good and bad, both for you and on the society where we plan to apply that research. And therefore we need a research which will not just create material wealth, which it must, but also pay attention to the cultural diversity. And that attention, again I'm saying something very provoking, cannot be done by just bringing what we call the underprivileged groups and quotas into our educational institutions. It is more by understanding the diverse values that people have in different social stratas of society, practices, traditions, resources, living knowledge systems, because then we would have actually understood what this diversity is about rather than the mechanical thing that we continuously do. And I was reading a speech, I've done a fair amount of reading of Mahmood Mamdani, and he was talking of this, that this enlightenment model that we bought into was not our model. He talks of Africa being excluded from it, but so was India. India was also excluded from it. And therefore, maybe the time has come, as the balance is shifting to the east, and the time has come to actually see whether there is another model, or whether there is a syncretic model which might be able to take the concerns of both these models, and therefore this whole business of rigid curriculum, rigid modes of evaluation, no space for people to grow and innovate and be given the credit for that growth and innovation, I think we'll have to change if we want to create. It has to be open-ended systems where we find a place for all this. And we were talking of the slower mode of. I think in our culture we've always privileged the slower. We've always said do some meditation, slow down, because then the tempest of your mind will cease and the solutions will come from within. And of course, even in allopathy, you have slow release of drugs because they are more effective than the immediate pumping. I have asthma, which I have overcome actually a lot by just meditation. But I used to use slow release because otherwise I would be ill all day long. So therefore, it perhaps is a more creative and efficient way of doing things than just rushing around from here, there, and everywhere, and creating the storm that we create in our lives. So I won't take up more of your time, but these are my responses to Professor Aniruddha. Thank you.
Can we take some questions?
I'm always amazed by the fact that we call people poor, because I think we must refer to the fact that they are economically disadvantaged, and I think some of the most creative people that I've seen have come from the economically weakest and so on. Yeah. Okay, is that okay? So we work with a category called the homeless, and Delhi has about 1% of its population lives on the street, not even in the slums. And I cannot stop being amazed at the intense strength, hope that keeps them going, because none of us in this room would survive even 2 days out on the street to just live your lives there. And our research has shown that there are people who even live 2 to 3 generations on the street, and I can't stop thinking about what keeps them alive. And all the time we're trying, the whole official effort is to look at them as these homeless people, they're suspect, they must be chased out of our cities, not celebrating the strength. None of our cities would survive without the homeless population. It is this category of people who are rickshaw pullers, headload workers, garbage vendors, who keep us, our services so subsidized. And instead of celebrating this entire sector that is, so hopeful and so courageous, we are forever kind of being anti-poor. So what do we do? How do we change mindsets? Nobody's dying to live on the streets, but there's a paucity of low-income housing. And even if you go into a slum, there's a whole effort of making our city slum-free. But if you walk into a slum and see how beautifully they manage space in a tiny little room, and store things and do all of these things, it's a completely amazing phenomenon. So I think we've got to just constantly celebrate our more economically weaker, and disadvantaged groups than we do in our official policy documents.
Sure. That's an input. Anybody else? Yeah.
So I have a question. As much as all of us, okay, I'll wait for the mic.
Carry on.
Hello. Yeah. So as much as all of us agree as to what really is going wrong, or like what more can we do right, I really wanted to know how we can do it. Does it mean setting up of new institutions? Does it mean getting a new curriculum for education in, or like at what level does change really need to start?
What I'll do is we'll take 2-3 questions together. I think there's one more that will go.
Excuse me.
Yeah, in Hyderabad, there is this yearly ones where people come to treat themselves for asthma with that small fish and that paste. That fish. It has been proved wrong. Yeah, it's been proved. It's been proved by scientists abroad that it doesn't really work. But it doesn't really work. But the belief system in India it helps. So, how do you go on with such things? Like, how do you take it ahead?
Yes, sir. Or even their country also has a belief-based system.
They circulate
peanut when they have a space launch. Yeah. In NASA, they have, when the Mars mission was launched recently, they settled it peanut. That is a good omen for us.
No, even in drug resistant, the placebo effect and all that is there. Just give water and get solved.
This is a suggestion to Anil, your old-time colleague. I was very impressed, of course, your whole talk was fascinating. But one point I just want to point out is incentives inspire. I think this is an extremely important one because we are completely going the Western route, Incentives means you have to give 20 crores a year, 30 crores a year. If you give 30 crores this year for salary, executives, you have to give 30%, 50% more next year. I think this is just a suggestion to Anil. You take up that one issue about these incentives. Instead of aping the West, we are trying to ape everything. So at least there are many good things about the West. But this particular point, that it is not necessary to just pay crores and crores and crores of salary to employees and executives. We can find some other more innovative ways of recognizing the work that people can do. I think that will do a great deal for our country.
I think as goes again, I am Ahmedabad though. Next slide. You had a question. I think could you answer this, Anil? You had a specific question. Do you have a problem, but do you have a solution? That would be I think Anil would like to ask this question.
I would just say that solution will begin to happen when we come out of catalyst mode of thinking. Many times we say we are a catalyst. There could be nothing more inappropriate and inopportune. Because catalyst doesn't undergo a change. And no change can come without changing
It's
ourselves.
also non-participative.
It's non-participating.
And reactive.
So therefore, if we have to bring about change, first condition is to change within ourselves. 5 habits that I will change in myself before I ask anybody else. In other words, if there's a deep-seated inertia in my mind that I should have done this, I should have done that, but somehow never found time to do those, go and do it. So I think the first step is to empower oneself, have greater agency in oneself, despite having autonomy, which will give me a confidence that I can do things. Next step would be then to begin to realize that small steps actually matter. When we started 25, 30 years ago, we didn't realize that this movement will grow as it has tried to grow over the years. But it is growing. 13th Finance Commission, for example, when Dr. Kelkar was chairing it, he made a proposal, and now every district has a 1 crore rupee district innovation fund. Every single district. It never happened before. So I'm saying that things can happen. If you try and try long enough and hard enough, things happen. Now this confidence means that we should have some milestones which are easier to achieve, some more difficult, some more difficult.
There is something.
So my question is related to the functioning of an organization like yours. So I think everyone would agree that communication is a fairly easy deal in the urban areas. But how does one facilitate inter-rural and intra-rural knowledge transfer or network formation when there are such less means of organized communication present?
That's a very beautiful question because that is the crux of the society. We have to, instead of becoming a vertical society, we should have become more horizontal society, and we are a horizontal society. In a village, if God forbid anybody dies or anything happens, the whole village comes to know in no time, without Wi-Fi and without Twitter and anything else. So the lesser the density, population density, better is the information dissemination. Higher the density, as in multi-story building, lesser is the communication. So there is a very clear inverse correlation between density and density of people and density of communication. Number one. Number two, the Shodh Yatras that we have, the Indian language versions of newsletter, Telugu, Tamil, Oriya, Hindi, Gujarati, Kannada, Malayalam, different languages. So that is another way, because without local languages, there is no way we can keep this country together, no matter what anybody may claim. Large part of the country where we go and we meet people are talking in local languages. So naturally, bridges will be built by appreciating those languages. And third thing, which is very critical, is to appreciate the voluntary spirit of the people. As I told you before, and I will again say that there is a huge voluntary spirit available among the people. I'm sure many of you will become member of Honeybee. I'm quite hopeful. and will take up some mission. For example, we have done a study, we have been documenting the 100-year-old dadis, centenarian dadis. Why? Because when we give blessing to anybody, we say Sosal Jio. But when somebody lives 100 years, we don't care. So we have got a database of grandmothers. Why grandmothers? Because grandfathers don't live that long generally. Grandmothers live long. And what we found out of the study that we did, the more the stubborn a woman is, the longer she lives. Remember that. So if we really want to create networks, we will have to get hold of headstrong women. They are very powerful in creating networks, and men of course, and then have local languages, use local media. We have 20 million people traveling by train. This is one of my dreams which has not happened so far, but one day it will happen. 20 million people travel by train every day. If we can throw challenges in the long distance train and tell people that, look, send SMS to this number if you have a solution for this problem. Can you imagine this country at what rate will we grow? Every day there will be people who will come out with fascinating solutions. So these are ways in which we can network. There are many more ways, of course.
See, I have 3 nieces, the way he's saying that they will never listen to me anymore.
सर आप इनोवेटर से सबसे ज़्यादा टच में रहते हैं और सर मैं आपका एक्सपीरियंस जानना चाहता था कि सर इनोवेटर्स को मैं प्रॉब्लम कहाँ पे होती है और दूसरा है कि आज नॉलेज इकोनॉमी में पहले इंटेलेक्चुअल प्रॉपर्टी की फ्यूचर का वेपन बनता जा रहा है तो हम अभी भी जैसे 50,000 लास्ट ईयर फाइलिंग हुआ पैसे चाइना 5 लाख से पहुँच गया है हमें जापान पहले से ही आगे तो इस पर आपका सर ये जानना चाहेंगे कि कैसे हम इम्प्रूव कर सकते हैं और हम कैसे कंट्रीब्यूट कर सकते हैं।
पहली बात तो ये है कि एक दिनकर की लाइन है, उसको याद रखना जरूरी है। वो कहते हैं कि क्या जो पुल बनाएगा वानर ही कहलाएगा, क्या जो पुल बनाएगा वानर ही कहलाएगा, पार करेगी सेना विजय होंगे श्री राम। मतलब कि जिसको हमने बंदर बोल दिया ना, जिसने पुल बनाया था, एक्चुअली वो बंदर तो नहीं था, बंदर जाति का था, मानव जाति का था। तो एक तो जो संज्ञा है काम करने वालों की, उसको बदलना होगा। पहली बात कि हम उसको नॉलेज वर्कर बोलेंगे, ना कि केवल मैनुअल वर्कर। आपको मालूम है ये MNGRES जो है, महात्मा गांधी नेशनल रूरल एम्प्लॉयमेंट स्कीम, इसमें हम लोग 100 दिन के लिए 250 मिलियन 25 करोड़ लोगों को रोजगार देते हैं। किस काम के लिए? मैनुअल लेबर के लिए। मेंटल लेबर को नहीं देते। मेंटल लेबर वर्क नहीं होती इस देश के अंदर। मेंटल लेबर इज नॉट वर्क। अगर आपने गाया और आपका गाना रिकॉर्ड कर ले हम लोक संगीत या एक लोकल नरेशन ऑफ रामायण या महाभारत या कुछ भी, वो काम नहीं माना जाएगा। आपने कोई स्ट्रक्चर बना दिया, वो काम नहीं है। काम वही होता है जब आप पत्थर खोद के पत्थर को तोड़ते हैं और गड्ढे खोद के गड्ढे को करते हैं, वो काम है। इन अदर वर्ड्स द डेफिनेशन ऑफ वर्क विल हैव टू चेंज। एंड थर्डली, the patents, of course, NIF has filed more than 600 patents. I believe that we can change the rate, multiply many times if we can give proper support to our students who are doing wonderfully good work in terms of innovations. हम लोग कोशिश नहीं कर रहे हैं उस बात को निभाने की, और नए मॉडल चाहिए इनोवेशन के। हमने एक कॉन्सेप्ट बनाया है, 2 मॉडल बनाए। एक तो टेक्नोलॉजी कॉमन्स, जिसमें पीपल टू पीपल कॉपिंग इज नॉट ओनली अलाउड बट एनकरेज्ड, पीपल टू फर्म इज नॉट, पीपल टू फर्म थ्रू लाइसेंस, पीपल टू पीपल ओपन। एक मॉडल डेवलप किया। दूसरा GTIF, thanks to Department of Science and Technology, Grassroots Technological Innovation Acquisition Fund. We buy the rights of patent and make them open source, available at no cost or low cost. In other words, we have to blend the model for our needs. We cannot file a case against a small farmer who's copying from another farmer. That's not the society we want to get into. We have to develop a different framework, and it's possible.
Okay, I think I've been told we'll finish the program at 8:30, or I think 25 already. And let me sum it up. Okay, one last question. All right, let the question and the answer be short.
My main concern is that in all the schools in Delhi, for example, since I'm a Delhiite, there are no labs in the schools. Therefore, Indian school children are mugging up formula, and by mugging up that formula, going to IIT, and then we are complaining that none of the IITians, as far as I know, most of them are not coming up with inventions or innovations. So how, and when I was teaching, I did a lot of research. I rang up lab suppliers and said, जी 4-5 हज़ार में lab बन जाएगा, tables चाहिए और शुरू कर दीजिए. And yet no school has labs. And is that not a very serious matter, and how can it be addressed?
I think the internship with the artisans and mechanics will be the best solution for overcoming the problem of labs. Every municipal school and every government school should have a session where they will go to work with the local artisan and local mechanic. वो अपने आप सीख जाएंगे उनके साथ में उनको लैब जब बनेगी जब तक नहीं बनती है ये सेशन तो कल से शुरू हो सकता है.
Okay, I think I'll sort of summarize it because the theme of this particular presentation was talking about reimagined, redefined, and reignited. Basically, it's like back to the future. Primarily, he talked about the perspective and the grassroots, youthful creativity and innovation. Of course, in this, somehow, Dr. Gupta very cleverly said that IITians are out of this particular list and eventually end up in his own institution. I do not have the beard like him, so I can't do sermonizing. And I either Neville Mott used to have a beard as an organic chemist. Whenever he has crystallized something, he would shake his beard and crystallize it. So neither I have the beard nor I would have this ability to sermonize. I think we need to look at this issue from the perspective on which the speaker spoke today. The broad message that we did remember is the innovation system of India is not just limited to one segment of the formal system. And what he says is a huge opportunity in the non-formal system. And I have a famous correlation which I use these days, where I correlate education levels and innovation potential, and I draw a quadratic. When the education level is low, the innovation potential is high. When we go to our education schools and the systems and curricula that all of us tend to dabble with, the conditional mindset takes place and the innovation potential goes down. And it goes on so progressively at the end when it comes to a stage, we become the Secretary Department of Science and Technology. And then it gets back into the more creative mindset. So the quadratic function that I talked about today is further illustrated by the speech today from Anil Gupta, that there is a whole load of innovation opportunities in the grassroots system. And one doesn't have to depend only on empowerment of that very small segment. That does, of course, have to provide competitive innovations for space. Therefore, I think we need to worry much about what we are not able to do than worry about what we are able to do somewhat wrongly. And we end up discussing all the time, even in such discussions, what's wrong with what we're doing, rather than to ask what is right with what we're doing. Several examples that we talked about today are the kind of examples that made the innovation affordable, accessible and available, and much more important is the present innovation model of the world is focusing on the process of innovation, and that such innovation which is supported by a huge capital, it becomes unaffordable for 2/3 of the global population, and therefore what you talked about is an alternative model, and this alternative model existed long back, not that we have reinvented. Therefore he talks about redefine. And of course, I have said when we came here, what do you want definition for this country? This country as a whole is okay. And it is not a country, it is not a nation, it's a civilization. And a civilization which is connected by endurance and tolerance. And it is a huge ethical system that he talked about today, which is being buried in the context of globalization. Therefore, my sincere appeal to this audience is look at enormous lessons that still prevail in this non-globalized part of India. That's huge. And what he talked about is essentially that. And oftentimes we try to globalize that as well, then we have a different issue. I would like to finish with some kind of more positive feeling. Because Indians are absolutely obsessive optimists. And I define pessimist as one who sits in front of chocolate cake and cashew barfi and think about calories. Therefore, we are not that kind of people. Our society is different. My friend talked about Inspire, and I want to leave some message with this community. Under this scheme of Inspire, what we did, we announced 1 billion science awards for children in the age of 10 to 15. And we just gave 5,000 rupees. This is a different experiment. My colleague was worrying about the lack of laboratories in the schools. I would like to tell you that I studied in 21 schools for information. You might ask me whether my school threw me out all around, but that's also possible. But I went to a school which had no laboratory. And that's where I learned the science from, the most from. And what the teacher did was asked all the 27 of us in class 5 to go and collect a leaf each. We brought a leaf each. And she asked all of us to write 1 page of what we observed in that leaf. And no 2 people can bring the same leaf. Then we were asked to read out what we have done. And then she went and explained the palm leaf, which is thick, will sustain in an ecosystem where there's less of water, more of salt. And neem leaf, which is very thin and transpires water, requires larger amount of water. And she taught us enormous level of high principles of science of transpiration. That's done in nature itself is offers tremendous space. And I'm going to therefore tell you what is happening today. When we gave this 1 million award, we give only 5,000 rupees. The children go and do an experiment or a product from a laboratory system, and they will come and exhibit it in a district level. And we had from the 7.5 lakh children. We have already received 1 million, we released 1 million awards. They went ahead, from 7 million children, 7.5 lakhs, they went ahead and did some kind of a project and participated in a district level exhibition. And we sent jury. And 5 to 10% of that good looking projects were brought to the state. And from the state level entries, 5% was brought to Delhi. And in the last 3 years, we have been able to bring 2,680 children in the 10 to 15 age group to Pragati Maidan. And they go and exhibit. I have 315 jury members, each batch go around, spend half an hour with each child and produce this. Don't worry about the process. What happens is, I had a set of experts who look at the patentable potential of these exhibits. And in the last 3 years, they have shortlisted 430 of these innovations coming from the age group of 10 to 15 in this country for being patentable. And 12 patents have been filed. And the age group 10 to 15. One particular state, for the winner, they went and put up a 10 crore backup support and put up an industry out of this from a class 10 child. Therefore, my suggestion to this community is, let us look for solutions and not spend our energy and time talking about problems all the time. There are plenty of it. And good thing about India is it's not standardizable. Sometimes I even worry it's becoming non-governable. But the issue here is the diversity, the pluralism and the creativity that is not yet standardized is our virtue. Let us not look at them as a weakness, it's a virtue. Therefore, I believe that the large number of these grassroots systems somehow get connected to this. And I am a physical chemist by training. So we talk about this quadratics. And when you do the quadratics, we also talk about, of course, the methods in which you can connect both ends. And there's a process called tunneling. The tunneling goes laterally, not through the quadratic surface. This question here, how do we tunnel grassroots innovation into the formal innovation systems for the global market space. And that is really the experiment National Innovation Foundation itself is engaged in, a lot of things are done. And this particular letter that I got here, it talked about really coming together of stakeholders. I think that's coming together of stakeholders is truly the purpose of this process, and I thank the organizer for the opportunity to be here today. Wish you well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Anil, for that wonderful lecture. I think today this evening was very humbling kind of evening for some of us, because looking at some of these things, we feel that it's like with childlike wonder you will have to go into everything that you are engaged with. Perhaps that's the lesson that we will have to take. Every day wake up with wonder and surprise, as Anil said. And thank you, Dr. Ramasamy, and thank you, Dr. Kavita Sharma. And thank you, all of you, for being such a wonderful audience. I wish we had more time to ask questions, etc. And I also welcome all of you to the next lecture, which is at IIC, 6:30, the day after tomorrow, Harsh Mandar, will be chaired by Shiv Vishwanathan. Please be there. Thank you very much.